Hello and welcome again to The Truth in Real Estate and More Unscripted. My name is Keith Hadding with NC Realty Services and South Bay Developers, and the host with the most, and breaking new ground, ever learning new things and applying it to the world of tech that an old guy like me shouldn't even know. Anyhow, trying to do podcasts to keep up with the times, and so here we are. Today, for the first time ever, I'm actually videoing this, and it will be shown audio and video on Spotify, where it'll be a audio-only podcast everywhere else, wherever you get your podcasts at. So, again, my name's Keith Hadding, and I'm just excited to be able to do another segment. It looks like my audience is growing a little bit, although I'm still looking for some feedback. I'm still looking for some people to come in the office and do a podcast with me. It's surprisingly easy, and I think if you'd come by and see it, you'd be shocked at, at the way I do it. We call it Unscripted because it's basically scripted off of these little notes that I leave laying around all over on my desk. If you've been in my office, you've seen I'm buried with these little yellow notes. I get an idea, I jot it down, and I throw it in the pile. So, okay. So, day number one, first video time with the podcast, and so some of you are probably blessed and not able to see my smiling mug, but for those of you who can, thank you. And we're breaking ground. We're making history today together. How about that? I keep threatening people as I talk to them I'm going to do a Twitch account. I am an avid Fortnite player, although I'm not very good. And so I think I'm going to name it, Come Learn Fortnite with Grandpa, and see if some of the young people can I would do it a little differently than most. I would play with other people, just random people like I do now, and just have fun doing it and learn things from them. And maybe, who knows, someday somebody might learn something from me on a video game. I doubt it. At my age, they're not supposed to anyways, are they? So, okay, so a little bit different, but here we are. The other thing I'm doing different today is I'm branching off. It's kind of like television, right? You have one show, and then a couple stars break off and they do a show of their own, and they keep the character alive and moving. So I'm doing the same thing. We started with The Truth in Real Estate and More Unscripted. That's the episode you're listening to and watching, maybe, on Spotify today. We also broke off and started doing what we call Monday Morning Miseries, our rants and raves, where I talk about my experience with what I had for breakfast, usually on the way to the office, or the traffic trying to get here on the way to the office. Don't even get me started today on how bad the traffic was. You'll have to jump over to the Monday Morning Miseries to hear those rants and raves. And I'm really waiting for that to kind of take off and grow wings of its own, because I think there's really a lot of opportunity there for people to kind of just get things off their chest. And I don't want it to become necessarily a political segment, but we should be voicing our opinions in all matters that are important, whether it be, sports or politics or money or insurances or, just whatever it is that's giving you heartburn. Feel free to chime in there, and let's, it's a safe place for you, because you virtually can hide behind anonymity and post it to my channel. I'll be the guy who gets in trouble for your comments. So I'm hoping that'll take off. Now, I'm also going to do another thing, because we've spent so much time on the Monday Morning Miseries talking about restaurants. I wanted to do something. I'm gonna break a segue off on that, and I'm really not, instead of being a food critic, that's not really what I want to do with that. I want it to be more about the experience, because I've talked about in the past how the labor shortage is what's the right way to put this? I probably said it wrong when I did the podcast about it, but it's watering down our labor pool. And people are hiring people that are maybe a little less skilled and a little less teachable, even in some cases. And it's having an impact on the products that we buy. And it's very evident in the restaurant business, more so than I have ever seen before. And so that's a little bit about what I want to discuss on that podcast. Is really going to be, what the experience is like at the local facilities and restaurants and diners and things that I stop and partake of. I do a lot of takeout, pizza joints, Italian restaurants, sandwich shops, those kind of things too. So a lot of fast food restaurants. My background is a little more in fast food, for those of you who know me. But even in that, we're really not talking about, I guess we will talk a little bit about how it's affected the end product. But I'm just as concerned, more so even, about the experience itself, how people were treated, and we're gonna do our first one today, so you can jump over from here and go to. I don't know. I got to find a name for it. Again, I don't want to be a food critic. We're gonna call it Restaurant Experiences 101. How about that? Restaurant Experiences 101. So jump over that, and you'll hear about the first one I'm going to stumble through and just kind of get us started. And on all these channels, we really recommend that you chime in. Send us your opinions. We'll post it on the podcast, or we'll read them on the next podcast. However you want to do it. Whatever you find is your comfort level, we would be excited to have you participate on them. Okay, so with all that said, and taking up half of my time, not half, but almost half, and over a third of the time, we need to get to the reason we're here today, and that's the truth in real estate and more unscripted. Because our market is in such a wild range of happenings, and so is our economy and our politics, and all of these things have an impact on your investment in real estate. And so we need to talk a little bit more about that as we do each week on these episodes. Today I'm looking at an article that came from, it's a Fannie Mae article, economic growth forecast downgraded as soft landing appears increasingly unlikely. Now, I'm going to say this first, and not to deal specifically with the author of this article, but as a whole, it's a little easier to forecast when you're going to do it for years and years and years. In my world, in the appraisal business, we tend to have to forecast today and now, and people are looking for that immediate fix in the change. And I get that conversation and that question every single day. What's going to happen? When are the prices going to come down? Those kind of things. So I'm going to paraphrase this article, so we don't have to be too critical of the way I'm saying it. That's my fault. Instead of just reading the article to you, can certainly go and read it for yourself. It's a Fannie Mae article, and it's published from their newsroom. So and it's an article dated from April 19th, 2022. So that's very current. And the problem that I'm having with it is it's really not current in the sense that they're talking about projecting year over year over year, as opposed to projecting what's going to happen here and now. They do talk about the GDP growth and that kind of stuff for this year and next. So they are trying to hone that in here. But most of that stuff is really not, I think, what my listening audience is actually trying to tune into. There may be a few of you out there, and I apologize for not getting deep enough for those of you that do like that kind of stuff. But I think my average person is a buyer and seller and investor in the real estate market today, and they're looking for how they can turn that profit or maximize that investment for themselves today, and not necessarily for the economy as a whole. So let's talk for a minute about where we think we are in the big picture to answer the question that I get every day. What's going on with the market? When are the prices going to come back down? My standard answer for most people in that is they're not coming back down. There's too many hands in the cookie jar, and there's too much greed in the world today, and we kind of celebrate that kind of greed as opposed to frowning upon it. And so we don't really shame businesses and owners and that kind out of doing those kinds of things. Okay, and on the flip side of that, to take defense of those people, the builders, the developers, the salespeople that are involved in that we're talking about having all those hands, and the suppliers. Many of them took it on the chin when the pandemic started and the market went down. We had this big recession. And on a downhill slope like that, it's really hard for them not to lose money, because they've bought at one level and now they're forced to sell at a lower level to be competitive. And so they things get kind of thin. And then in a good market, it's just the opposite. They bought at one rate, and the price has gone up, and they're able to sell it at that new price and make profit. In the housing market as a whole, I would tell you that if you're buying and selling real estate in the same market, I'm going to buy one today or sell one today and buy one tomorrow, it almost doesn't matter. I mean, you know, everything always matters a little, but it almost doesn't matter, because if you're in a good market, you sold and you made great money and you're excited, but when you repurchased, you also had to pay more for it, which meant you used up that profit that you made. But at the end of the day, you solved whatever your problem was of having to move from one house to the other, be it a job transfer, locational retirement, upsizing, downsizing, whatever it is you're doing. So you can't really get hurt in that market, but you also can't get rich in that market, okay? It's just kind of, that's the parallel in the market. Now, I don't want to buy the first house in the neighborhood. I don't want to buy the last, but I want to buy early. I don't want to buy the biggest or the smallest. I want to buy as close to the middle as I can, because the closer to the middle, the more popular that house becomes in that neighborhood. And bought early means I probably paid less in the normal rule of subdivision development, in the normal world of property development as a whole. Let me explain that, or what my thought process is there. Traditionally, a subdivision is developed, and the first section, a builder builds homes, and let's just say, hypothetically, they're 12 to 1,500 square foot ranches. As that section develops out, they're starting to put bonus rooms, we call them frogs, right? Finished room over the garage, or garage apartments, or however they're set up. But they start to add those to the latter end of the first segment, because in the second section, they're going to increase the size of the house and therefore increase the cost of the homes. We want that because now the guy that bought early in the first section has a marketable product. He can reasonably sell his house and get what he owes on it and some profit. That's the name of the game. You buy low, sell high, right? And so the normal appreciation rate of that happening is also aided in the fact that the developer increased his asking price, not on the same product, but he's starting to evolve in a little bit larger square footages. I know subdivisions that started at 12, 1,500 square feet and are building 2,500 to 3,000 square foot houses in another section, and they've just continued to build and grow throughout, and it's been a good transition because they've maintained that. Early on, I had someone come to me and say, "Hey, Keith, how did you know this bubble was going to burst back in the 2008? How did you know that was going to happen? You told me about this 6 months, a year ago, and then here it is happening now." Now, I'm not, I shine my crystal ball a little bit, but it doesn't work any better than most people in the profession. I'm not professing to have some unforeseen expertise or information. It's just that what I was noticing was subdivisions were not continuing to grow. They were staying in the same phase and building out and building a little slower, and the turnover was getting slower, the days on market a little longer. And so what that started to tell me is the guy who bought early in the subdivision can't really get out because they're selling brand new for the same kind of price point that he bought his at a year, 2, 5, 7 years earlier. So where he should have been able to say, look, they're selling houses for $25,000 more down here, I can save you a little bit of money, I'll sell you one for only $15,000 less. He still made a little money on his sale. They felt like they got a good deal. Did they really? Yes, but down there they had a new house that was slightly larger normally, but in this case they were not. And that pattern was starting to be seen across the board, which told me these people are going to be stuck. They're not going to be able to move their property and make money. They're going to be upside down in their mortgage. What choices do they have? If they're forced to move, they've either got to put that in the rental market to try to make their mortgage payments, or they've got to let that house go back. And then that creates what we call gray inventory, people who are more than 90 days behind on their mortgage payment. And you end up with this big backside building up, kind of like we are in the car industry today. There's a lot of gray inventory, as I understand it, in the automobile industry. Okay, so that's kind of the cycle of a subdivision. We constantly build a little bigger for a little bit more money, and that helps to push along the appreciation rate. And so the early guy can make a little bit more money on his house, and so will everyone else along the way. And when it becomes a problem is when there's some kind of a dip. We get about every 7 or 8 years we get a dip in the market, and sometimes those dips are recessions. They get pretty big, but normally you just get a normal adjustment dip, and that kind of puts a little bump or hedgeway in there because it knocks things back down a little bit. It's designed, I think, to help control inflation, which we really haven't had. We had the recession, which was a big bump in the road. And since then, we haven't really had any adjustments. We've been on this high track. But honestly, in the markets I serve, if I took and go all the way back before the recession, let's say I go back to 2000, and I track average prices, I see this constant growth. And it goes all the way up till the time we had the recession. There was a big drop or decline. It hit bottom, and it began to climb back up again. And it's just passed in the last 6 or 7 months through that window where we would have been had there not been a recession. So if we cut the recession out of this thing, we're kind of right still on that same plane. And so that just goes to show you that's the normal process or system. Now you hope that wages keep up with that or actually grow beyond that. Many times I've sold young people a home and I tell them it's okay to be close to their budget where they are now. They're young and they're growing and their income levels are going to continue to increase. I wouldn't give that same advice to people that are nearing the end of their careers because they probably have reached their pinnacle of what they're going to have in terms of income, and they've got to look for that little bump down when they go into retirement. Not everybody has a bump down, but for those that do, they have to look at transitioning into that lower period. Ideally, we want to have our house paid for and our cars paid for, all the big ticket items, so that bump is insignificant to them. But that's really where we're concerned in this country, because there's so many people that don't have good solid equity in their homes, don't really have a retirement nest egg to sit on. They're nearing the end of that curve. They're making all they're going to make now, and if they can't start to put that away and make that happen, then it's going to be a problem for them, and they become probably dependent on their state or on the federal government to support them in some degree to help them survive that, or they have to make a big lifestyle change and step way down in where they live and take advantage of what equity they would have built up in what they did do. So anyways, I'm chasing a lot of rabbits down a lot of holes. Let's get back to our article, because I've taken up most of my time. Like I said, a long introduction on the front. So this article is basically talking about they were expecting there to be this soft landing in the economy, that things would kind of just pillow back down, and that now they're saying that may not very well be the case. I see tightening, preemptive rather than responsive. As such, we've updated our 2023 forecast to include a modest recession. Okay, now they're projecting a modest recession in 2023, but one that will not expect to be similar to the magnitude of the one or the duration of the one that we did in 2008. So a mild recession, more than an adjustment, but a mild recession is what they're calling for. Again, fairly reliable, I think, safe bet to call for that, because I think they see the same thing that I've seen. Part of our problem is that we have a lot of baby boomers that have inheritance money and funds and things, and they have these assets to spend or to invest. If they don't, then they diminish, so they want to invest them. They buy houses or beach houses. I'm at the beach, so a lot of people buying big beach houses. And property values have been climbing because we created this shortage in the market. How did we create that, you say? We didn't do the pandemic. Well, when the pandemic hit, and I think this is fairly true in a lot of places. I don't think it's unique to my market areas, but when the pandemic hit, my tract builders, who are a large percentage of the new homes in our market. When I say large percentage, I don't know the specific numbers. I may dig this up, try to find it somewhere and do it, tell you on another podcast, but 80% maybe, 85% of all new homes here are tract builders, people building large subdivisions, lots of homes. There are a lot of patio homes, retirement communities, things like that here. But when they said stop building during the pandemic, just stop, just finish what you got on the ground, and let's take a look and see what happens. They created this shortage because now you just took the biggest player in our market out of the game, right? So let me tell you how I know that's a fact now, okay? Looking back on the historical data, they track the number of homes that we build, and they block that into generational changes. So every 10 years. So if we took and we go all the way back 100 years and we look at every 10 years how many houses were built nationally, right? Because sometimes you might get people that are moving to the west. Sometimes you might get people moving to the east or going north or going south. Right now there's a big movement towards the southeast here where I'm at, which is great, great for me. And so it's more reliable, right? The law of large numbers, the more numbers you have in there, the more reliable the data. It's more reliable to take the entire country. And so in the entire country, they started tracking the number of homes built each year. And they do that because they're anticipating, right, what's going to happen when the millennials start buying houses, which they're doing now. Every generation is really bigger than the last. We're multiplying, right? It's not an addition and subtraction. It's a multiplication. 2 people get married, have 3 kids. So we're going to break that down into generation X, Y, Z, and maybe they could look a little smaller than millennials. But if we took the same time period in those generations and measure them out, it's a larger number. Okay, so we should have. Let me just cut to the chase. We should have built about 28 million new homes in this country from 2010 to 2019. That'd be 10 years. 2010 to 2019. But we only built 5.8 million. 5.8 million. We had a really good start, and then we just died because of the recession, and we didn't build. So we created this huge shortage. We're to 20 million houses short, okay? Now, since the pandemic is closing out some, it's not over. I don't know if it'll ever be over, right? This could be the new way of life, that there, you know, the next new wave or variant comes along. But we're becoming able to handle it a little better. We're open in society. We're back face to face. We're at the table in the discussions together. But the impact is lessened, and so we're able to get back out into the world, and now we're back to building. And as soon as that started to happen, all of our tract builders are back to swinging wide open. We have all kinds of other developers getting in the game. Just where I'm sitting, they're putting 300 houses brand new across the street. There's 2 subdivisions down here that are going to be excess of 500, one greater than 1,000, right here in this small market of a community that has no metropolitan area. Brunswick County, North Carolina has no metro area. We can go to Myrtle Beach, which is Horry County, for a metro area. We can go to Wilmington, which is, you know, New Hanover County, but Brunswick County does not, okay? And yet we have this huge growth, one of the, if not the fastest growing counties in the state of North Carolina. Okay, so what does that mean, and why do I mention that? And why do I say that has anything to do with their projection for this recession? It's because once those builders, right now they're breaking ground. They're clearing and grading and putting infrastructure in, streets and cable, electrical, all that kind of stuff. But when they break ground to start building and framing houses, and buyers step in and begin to buy, we get to that point that there's actually a product they can live in, the market's going to flip very quickly from a seller's market back over to a buyer's market. Because we're going to go from this huge shortage that we have now. Brunswick County only had 402 active listings across the board, period, when I did a search of it a couple weeks ago. 402. They should have 5 times that. And so so they're going to eliminate that when all of these builders that are now working hard all of a sudden start putting their houses in the market, and they're going to be competing with each other, and they're going to have 300 over there and 500 over there and 1,000 over there all at the same time. People are going to flock in here to get them, but at some point the buying starts to slow down, the product becomes stabilized, the supply and the demand balance out, and the market shifts back over, and now the buyers are back in control because they can buy A, B, C, or D. They're not fighting over A. They're able to buy what they want, and so the market will at least stabilize. So when you couple that with higher interest rates, which are already climbing, when you couple that with higher interest rates, less people are going to qualify for as much house. They're either going to have to buy less house or not buy at all. Some of those millennials will probably just can live with mom and dad a little longer until we get this the inflation under control. But you see how the economy and the government and everything all kind of work hand in hand, and they all have an impact on our market as a whole. So the recession, I think, that they're projecting in 2023 is based on that. It's based on those houses becoming available, the market stabilizing, interest rates continuing to climb slightly to intentionally slow the market down, and that's just the way they're anticipating that market to be Let's see, did they say anything else significant in here? Fannie Mae, Advanced Equitable, that's just a Fannie Mae plug. Let's see. And of course, a big disclaimer about why they can't be held accountable for what they're telling us. With the economy, what they call, looking for the acronym here, the Economic Development Commentary, Economic Forecast, Housing Forecast, Multifamily Market Commentary, to receive mail updates. They let you click and log into their site there. But what else to say? In here, particular, we expect housing prices to decelerate to a pace more consistent with the income and growth interest rates. Households with a 3% 30-year fixed mortgage are unlikely to give that up in favor. Let's see, they make a good point there, where a lot of the early signs of our new growth, once the recession came and kind of hit bottom, and interest rates went down to kind of try to get us out of that hole, people that were very equitable in their house, they refinanced, right? They went ahead and refinanced. They got a lower interest rate because it was very competitive, and they went ahead and refinanced and reduced their payments, and it gave them more buying power in the marketplace. You're not going to see that in this kind of a turn here, because the people that are sitting there with a 30-year mortgage now already have a fairly low program, and they bought when they were at 3%, give or take, plus or minus. They're not going to jump off and take a higher interest rate, even though reducing the terms might spread their payment out a little bit. Listen, don't be fooled by that. I'm going to go over on this particular first one with the video, and I'm going to go long. But I'll say this very quickly. The refinancing game you have to be careful of. You understand that when you get a mortgage, your amortization chart will show you that you're paying primarily interest on your payments in the front end, and mostly principal is on the back end. Okay, so if you have this loan in place for 5, 6, 8, 10 years, and then you refinance, you've been paying mostly interest on that. Now you're going back to square one where you're paying mostly interest again. You understand that, right? It's like the reverse of compound interest. It's like only the interest of the compound interest. So be careful of those refinances. They really look attractive when you spread the money out and it brings your monthly payment down. But just bear in mind, you're not really dipping into that equity. Now, no one's having an equity problem right now because markets across the board have been astronomical. I've seen markets that are 30, 40, 45% increases over where they were. I had one person tell me recently, a land developer, that land prices have tripled during this uptick that we've had during this shortage. Yeah, and the land numbers have gone up because more buyers are just buying the land and building a house, or that's what I do, scattered lot. I do scattered lot modular construction, and so my business has never been better here in terms of doing that because of the shortage. So be careful of the refi. There's my tip of the day in that, the truth uncensored kind of thing, and watch the economy. If you're a buy low, sell high kind of person, your buy low is getting ready to come back around the corner again. Probably, I would say 2024, 2025. I don't think you're going to see that recession like they're calling for quite so much, because I think there's more money infused in the market. It's just like I was talking about, and we're going to talk about this more on the second podcast, the new one, right? What I call that, the Restaurant Experience 101. The labor shortage can't stay this way for long because we're infusing millions and millions of illegal immigrants that are going to get into the workforce. They have to find a place to call comfortable. They have to get through all of the other red tape, and then they get out here in the marketplace, whether it be legal or illegal. And so it gives us a push up on our labor force, and I think we should have already felt that, but I think it's coming. You're going to get that upward push in the labor force, and we're going to get some of this to come back. That I do think will come back. Prices aren't going to come down much, but I think the labor pool will get better. All right, so gosh, I'm going to get close to 30 minutes on this thing. That's 10 minutes longer than I like to go for your benefit. I'm sure I've put some of you to sleep. Again, my name is Keith Hadding with MC Realty Services and South Bay Developers, bringing you another episode of The Truth in Real Estate and More Unscripted. We've certainly talked about everything today. Please jump over and listen to the new podcast that I'm getting ready to record, and I'm going to do that video as well to try that experience again and try to learn more about this new line of intervention. Keith Hadding, NC Realty Services. I'm like one of those credit card commercials. I don't want to say their name. I want to give them a plug. I'm everywhere you want to be. You can call, text, email, come by, listen to me on the podcast, or by all means, chime in your opinions. Come by the office and see me. We'll sit down. We'll do a podcast together. It'll be a lot of fun. Thank you. Thank you for listening, and God bless.